blockchain supposedly is the competitor to that because it is not centralized, right? So it's not owned by MasterCard and Visa. It's not owned by anyone.
At least as far as we
So
know.
as far as we know, payment processors, they actually have a risk threshold that they cannot surpass. Otherwise, they get fined, right? And the acquiring banks that serve as a processor, they have a threshold. Otherwise, the government's coming after them. Consulting gives you a good way to think about problems in a framework manner. And at the end of the day, it's when it comes to AI startups, it's whoever has a proprietary data source and a trained model. So having proprietary data is going to be something that investors look for when it comes to assessing whether a startup is valuable or not.
Well, Chikao, thank you for coming on our podcast. Could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name is Chi. I am the co-founder and CEO of Chargeblast. We help merchants like SaaS providers and e-commerce shops maintain dispute rates at 0%. My background is mostly in business and finance and have a biology degree from Yale.
Okay, thank you very much. And your background, I understand, coming up from basically lower middle class all the way up to Yale, and then quite a substantial career after that. Could you talk a little bit about that transition?
Sure, yeah. I grew up in Rochester, Minnesota. My family were immigrants. I was born in Wuhan, China. Moved to the US when I was 5. Grew up in Rochester, which is known for the Mayo Clinic. So I was surrounded by biological research as well as doctors. So of course, based off of that influence, I kind of leaned into that realm. But I always had an itch for business. I bought and resold Pokemon cards. I bought and resold candy and soda pop, and was always looking to make a dollar. I think part of it is because of my upbringing. We didn't have much money growing up, but it kind of that interest stayed with me throughout college and beyond.
All right. So what kind of, can you describe your, like how you set your goals as a young kid? Like what made you strive for greatness? What motivated you?
Sure. So I think it's funny. It's like when people grow up, they typically have someone they look up to, right?
Yeah.
And that would kind of be how they anchor themselves to goals. Like I kind of want to be like this firefighter. I kind of want to be like, my uncle or something like that. For me, I grew up watching a lot of movies, especially Marvel movies. So I kind of aspired and looked towards superheroes. Spider-Man was a big one because he was super smart, right? And super smart. And then you have like Tony Stark, Iron Man, who's very funny and witty, right? And then you have Batman, right, with DC, but he basically channels his misfortune to try and do better for the world, even though he doesn't necessarily need to be known, right? So it's a combination of these superheroes that kind of gave me an aspiration of kind of who I wanted to become. I want to be someone who's pretty smart. I wanted to be someone who's sociable as well, but also be able to make impactful changes in the world. So that kind of helped me. That was kind of my guiding compass, is these superheroes and the traits that they represent.
That's interesting. We all have our heroes when we're young. My hero was actually Bruce Lee and my grandma, because they
There you
both
go.
left their country of birth for opportunity, faced challenges, both sides, and kind of became a bridge and a symbol to many. So that's great having those symbols. Who are you a symbol to now? Do you have any mentees or anyone that you encourage from the younger generation?
Yeah, sure. A lot of Yale students tend to reach out and ask for my guidance since I have a pretty broad background. So my background, right, is some life sciences, management consulting, corporate development at an agriculture unicorn, and an analyst at a hedge fund, right? So pretty broad background. A lot of it is just I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to go and stay in biology, but wanted to do business. So a lot of students at Yale still reach out to me, and I'm always happy to take a call. Sometimes we chat for like hours about what they want to do and what they're interested in. And my biggest tip to them is usually try a lot of different things, but really try and understand who you are. Are you risk motivated? Are you pretty risk averse? Are you more quantitative, right? Or are you more qualitative and more sociable, right? Even in finance, it can be very diverse, right? You have hedge funds, which literally you can work all day on a team, but not talk to anyone, right? Because you have your own coverage. Meanwhile, private equity, you're doing a buyout, you're working with a team, there's a lot of materials to prep, a lot of data to analyze, et cetera. You're always working together, right? So even in finance, there's nuances.
Great advice. Where would you basically put yourself on that scale in terms of the quantitative, qualitative, sociable, etc.?
Yeah, I like to be pretty I feel like I could wear a lot of hats. I'm probably, if I had to lean in one direction, I'm probably more on the quantitative side. And I think that reflects in how I go about building businesses. Whenever there's a question of what should we do, I'm always trying to look for a test, or you could even say like, a science project, testing something and then seeing what the data shows us. If the data is positive, if we're going to drive an ROI on this action that we take in the business, then we should go for it. And we should put as much money behind it as possible until we no longer get an ROI on it. So certainly I would say I'm more on the quantitative side, but I do enjoy meeting people at conferences. I do enjoy getting lunch with my partners, with our business partners. So try and be pretty flexible.
Yeah, that's great. Could you talk about when you knew that you didn't want to do molecular biology?
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great question. So I went into Yale as pre-med. I did 4 years of research at the Yale School of Medicine, and I was pre-med, or I was on my path to becoming a doctor all the way until the fall semester of my senior year. So I'd actually taken the MCAT, right?
Wow.
Had all the courses to become a doctor, had all the test scores, but deep down, I knew I was more risk taking, right? And frankly, I really didn't like studying, right? And biology is a lot of information you have to intake. But I like taking risk, and I like having my own businesses. Started a couple businesses at Yale, Furno and Simplex, the latter of which is still running. They sell single-stranded DNA ladders. And I also founded the Yale Blackjack team, right? So I think the biggest pinnacle of that was me and two other guys went to Puerto Rico for a week, played blackjack 8 hours a day for about 4 days, 4 or 5 days straight. And we went in with $18,000 and we left in with over $30,000, right? So really like taking measured risk. And yeah, you really don't get to do as much of that in the biological sciences and in the field of medicine. So that's kind of what I knew. And that's kind of when I started looking at opportunities that would bridge me from my biology background to the world of business and finance.
And I'm sure you leverage all of that studying in a new way now. Could you talk about how you're using molecular biology in the way that you look at strategy and decision making with businesses?
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway I had with my degree and my research is nothing ever in an ecosystem. There's always more than two players. There's always more than just you and the other person across the table, right? For example, in biological pathways, you have hundreds of proteins, catalysts, enzymes that are driving processes within your body. You have to understand the unique roles that each provide in order to, give you the energy and ability to think, walk, breathe, everything, right? It's the same in business. And I think not many people take this into enough consideration. But in, let's say, the healthcare world, right, you have the patient and you have the doctor, but you also have the pharmaceutical companies that are really developing drugs at scale, and you have the biotech companies, which is more R&D, right, and you have payers, the insurance folks that make sure that you're not paying tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket, right? Each of them are incentivized differently, and each of them, and if you understand those incentives, I believe that you will get the best outcome for yourself, because then you can manage expectations and manage those incentives.
Do you draw a map of these relationships when you're looking at, let's say, an acquisition or a new player in a market? Do you look at, okay, what are the inputs and outputs? What are the incentives? What are the ratios of that incentive? If I move this piece, what's the change that's going to happen? Do you kind of draw that out? Could you talk about that?
Yes, yes, exactly. So I think this is most relevant in the world of the payments world, right? So in the payments world, you have two large titans. You have MasterCard and Visa. But then there's a lot of different companies that really work under them. You have chargeback companies, you have payment processors, you have banks, right? And if you don't understand how the information flows from one party to another, and if you don't understand like what each party is, interested in, right, you got to balance both processing risk with processing volume. You just can't take all the volume. There's some risky volume that you should probably not take, that's fraudulent, right? And understanding those relationships is absolutely key, because let's say you want to innovate. Well, look, you have two titans that could literally just step on your company at any point, and you can't operate because they really control the payments world. So you have to be very careful about how you navigate this very complex web of large companies in order to figure out, okay, now I can really start growing from this little niche and then being maybe even more competitive.
Right. You're playing in someone else's frame if you're playing in the MasterCard Visa world. And we hear a lot about blockchain or crypto. Do you think anyone is going to challenge that frame anytime soon?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. It's these titans, these large companies, they've basically built out the infrastructure of money flow, right? Blockchain supposedly is the competitor to that because it is not centralized, right? So it's not owned by MasterCard and Visa. It's not owned by anyone.
At least as far as we
So
know.
as far as we know, right? It could be the founder of Bitcoin could own everything. But yeah, as far as we know, like blockchain is an interesting area where now you have, if you look at Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's almost near all-time highs. You have more institutional investors who are more interested in dipping their toes into that realm, right? And what I heard something that's pretty interesting is now, because there's an ETF, right? And you're not buying just like Bitcoin off of Coinbase, you could just purchase this ETF off of your brokerage account. That opens up the appetite for a lot of large like retirement funds, et cetera, to start dipping in and seeing, okay, maybe this could be a small portion of our portfolio. And with that backing over time, potentially Visa and MasterCard get disrupted, but anytime soon, I think is pretty still up in the air.
So, by any metric, you're a fairly successful serial entrepreneur. How much of that do you think is attributed to thinking outside the box to thinking well inside the box? Could you talk about that relationship?
I like to think that nothing is binary, and I don't believe in lines, right? Because I mean, I'm not going to say like become a fraudulent actor, but let's say, in New York, jaywalking is not allowed, but you see jaywalking plenty of times, right? People need to get from point A to point B. Sometimes those lines can be broken and they're not punishable. And thus, you can break those lines, right? So thinking outside the box oftentimes means you might get in someone else's way, right? But if you can do it in such a manner maybe they won't realize or they won't care, right? So being able to be comfortable with stepping over the line, I think is very critical for success. Otherwise, if you're going to play by the world's rules and the laws made by humans, like the actual law and order and societal expectations, I don't think you'll be able to, really bring up anything innovative because, well, you just conform to the greater population.
Could you talk about the importance of identifying market needs, rapid iteration, and leveraging your unique insights?
Yeah. So I attribute the success to our team's operational excellence. And what I mean by that is like you said, we're pretty quick to iterate on product, but we're also very quantitative in our moves, right? And because we're willing to take risk and back these companies with our own capital initially, right? We were able to scale and grow, sometimes even faster than venture backed companies. So I really would attribute this operational excellence and focus on quantitative measures like return on ad spend, super critical for fast growth, right?
Mm.
Because if you're not willing to do the analysis, you'll never feel comfortable putting in your own money, right? The only reason why my co-founder and we were comfortable putting in, about 100 grand, it's not huge amounts, but it's not a small amount, is because the numbers look good, right? We knew our return on our ad spend, we'd get it back in about 2.5 months, right? And if we put in $1 out, we'll get $1.30 back in 2.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, that's great. That's way better than the stock market. So I guess I want to take all my money and put it in there. And it's proven to be true.
So you had mentioned the Pareto principle in terms of business strategy, measured in small input for a large output. Could you discuss some of the common missteps you see entrepreneurs make in seeking, like, quote unquote, perfect information, and how
Sure.
your approach has led to your success?
I consider myself a man of action, right? I like to be thoughtful, right? But I like to do things and test things and then be quick to change. Now, when it comes to strategy, especially at these Ivy League schools where you have a lot of intellectuals, but sometimes you don't get any doers, right? That's the issue. If you think about strategy too much and you're thinking, oh, well, this could go wrong, that could go wrong, well, we'll have this solution, but then something else can go wrong. Eventually, you're going to figure out like 100 things that could go wrong, right? And work against you before you even do anything.
Yeah.
And that's pretty disillusioned. Uh, that's not motivating, right? So what I like to do is obviously be informed, but get to maybe don't spend more than in like a strategy that you'd have to execute over the course of a week. Don't spend more than a day just sitting down and plotting it out, right? And then take action. If it goes wrong, well, it goes wrong and you try something else. But at least you're not spending 2 months sitting down thinking and then not actually doing.
Interesting. So you're approaching it first as an analyst with a time limit. So you're looking at it for, like, you put a hard cap of a day, and then after that you become a man of action. Is that pretty much the relationship?
Yep, I would say so, right? And I mean the quick thinking, honestly, like I really attribute to my training and upbringing, right? Because consulting gives you a good way to think about problems in a framework manner. So you can leverage these problems historical problems that you've solved or that you've consulted for and take those frameworks and quickly leverage them for something you're actually doing yourself. So I think these ways of framework thinking is really critical because it gives you the high level, and then you can do. You don't need to go into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, you mentioned your background might have contributed to that, your upbringing rather. Do you think immigrants have an advantage when it comes to entrepreneurship?
No, actually, I don't. I really don't because you don't have a safety net, right? or a lot of immigrants don't have safety nets. At least for me, right? I don't have a trust fund to fall back on. I don't have parents that make millions every year, right? So being an immigrant, you actually typically immigrants, I would say they are more risk averse, right? Because they have so much on the line. If they lose it, they really lose it all, and they have to go, let's say, back to their home country, right? So typically, I would say immigrants are risk averse. But the one thing that potentially happens to a few immigrants is they see what is possible in America and the American dream, and they really go for it, right? It's not just like, okay, I'll have my little share, but then they see like these billionaires, right?
Mm,
Only in America do you have so many billionaires so quick off of really their own hard work, right?
mm.
So I think that part, yes, you have an advantage.
That's a good point. I also thought of immigrants basically, like you had mentioned, thinking outside the box or looking at outside the lines. And they're very much living that way, taking advantage. Of course, their livelihoods on the line. But many successful entrepreneurs are immigrants. And I like to also think about, I call it outsider insights. So some insights that you could only have by not belonging, because you're kind of blinded by understanding. You're blinded by belonging in some. There's always this trade-off, this
Right.
duality. So, and I look at what you're doing, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Uh,
One thing I would add is like we founded Chargeblast has gotten a lot of great traction, but none of us have payments backgrounds, right? And in the payments world, man, if you work in payments, you work in it for like 16 years, right? And I think what was to our benefit was when we went into it, we didn't realize there were these huge giants that are doing chargeback alerts. And because we didn't know, right, we were more willing to give it a try and put our own like flavor on it, right? Now we know, and there's competition, a lot of competition, right? It's kind of a commoditized space. Now we know, but if we knew from the beginning, we may not have tried it out.
okay. So you mentioned chargebacks a number of times. And for people who don't know what that term means, could you explain what it is and why it's important?
Sure. A chargeback is a way for the credit card company to give some protection to the end customer, the consumer, right? Like you and I. So if we buy a product, let's say shoes, and they're getting shipped over from China, right? But when you open the box, it's completely ruined. That gives an opportunity for the end consumer to get their money back from the merchant,
Mm.
right? However, what has happened post COVID is friendly fraud has really skyrocketed.
Could you
And what I
describe
mean,
what friendly fraud is?
yeah, so what I mean by that is it's so easy to charge back nowadays. People will charge back even after they got perfectly fine shoes
Mm.
just to have a free product, right? People have kind of realized that they can start gaming the system with pretty little repercussions.
Okay. And how does that affect the company? I'm imagining shipping. Are there any other costs to the company?
Yeah. So the biggest cost is, let's say you are selling to a demographic, let's say students, right? You're selling some tools that students are using, physical tools, and students are not fantastic customers, right? And they don't have money, first off, right? As a college student back way when, I didn't have any money, right? And what they'll do is they'll use it and then they'll charge back. Pretty unfortunate. It happens quite a lot, right? And if the merchant really only serves that demographic, well, their chargeback rate is going to naturally be much more elevated
Hmm.
than other merchants. There is a certain point where if you get a chargeback rate of above like 0.65, above 1% or so, you can be kicked off or deplatformed from your payment processor like Stripe or Shopify. If you can't process payments, you don't have a business, right?
And does Stripe or some of these other platforms, are they aware of the friendly fraud issue? They just feel that it's better to play it safe from their perspective and kick off vendors from their platform?
Yep. Yes, they are aware of this, but the current ecosystem favors the end consumer, right? And this is kind of where incentives comes in,
Yeah,
understanding this ecosystem, right? The credit card company, the issuing banks, they're very incentivized to have the end consumer swipe, 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 and consume,
right.
right? If the end consumer is not happy and they're saying, well, my Amex didn't let me charge back, I'm going to go to JP Morgan and get a credit card there. Well, that's not great for the issuing bank, right? So the issuing bank really allows for this to happen. But at the same time, right, these chargebacks, which sometimes can be fraud, right,
Mm.
can actually be fraud. Well, payment processors, they actually have a risk threshold that they cannot surpass. Otherwise, they get fined, right? And the acquiring banks that serve as a processor, they have a threshold. Otherwise, the government's coming after them, right? So it's everyone protecting themselves and kind of leaving the merchant out to hang at the end of the day. So we feel, we're very happy that we're providing a solution for the merchant that's easy to use, is faster than other charge, is easier, saves more time than other chargeback alerts, and really helps them maintain their business.
Could you talk about where this idea came from? Like, how did you come up with the idea to start Chargeblast?
We had a chargebacks issue, and we were on Stripe, and we're like, oh my goodness, Stripe's algorithm is going to kick us off at any moment. We need to get our chargeback or dispute rate down. And we tried out multiple solutions on the market and found out that not many solutions work well with Stripe. And Stripe has its own like inner workings that makes it challenging for chargeback alerts providers. But at the end of the day, there was like you could fix it. We were still getting we still had chargebacks coming in. We couldn't reach out to our account executive because they wouldn't respond for like 2 weeks. And we're here like, ripping our hair out, trying to figure out what to do. So we decided like, look, there seems to be an opportunity for someone to come into the market, provide white glove service, right? Much faster response times, as well as more tech integration and more, frankly, automation. I mean, this industry is about 20 plus years old. It hasn't really changed in those years. Alerts are still sent out via email. And then merchants have to go in and scroll through and all their transactions and figure out which transaction to refund, right? So we wanted to be more tech forward.
Makes sense. And given your eclectic background, you have your time as a hedge fund analyst, a corporate development manager, and a strategy consultant. Who would you say you are first and foremost among those three? Or are they pretty much evenly distributed when you approach a new business venture or problem?
Yeah, that is a great question, right? I am very fortunate that my career has kind of given me training in very different areas, right? So with strategy consulting, it gave me the frameworks to approach problems pretty quick, right? And understand the problem and the ecosystems pretty quick. My time in corporate development, it was more operational. I stood up a team of folks that basically did outbound calls to farmers to sell them financial products to hedge against corn prices, right? Putting together that team and getting all the technology around it took a lot of planning, right? Putting down timelines, pushing people to do things, right? When they put it at the bottom of their list, but you have it at the top of your list, right? So getting that operational experience is critical, right? For action. And then the hedge fund experience really helped me understand businesses and numbers because, I mean, I don't want to simplify it too much, But at the end of the day, a successful business is one that drives revenue and has good margins, right? And there's actions you take, like taking price or increasing volume to drive revenues. And then there's actions you take to reduce your OPEX to drive margins, right? So the combination of the three really allowed me to kind of wear multiple hats as a founder, and I think equipped me pretty equally actually to founding the Chargeblast.
Yeah, interesting. Once you know that something has value and like a use, you learn to trust it. And so the more that you use it, the more
Right,
useful it becomes. So that's, I could see you kind of playing each of those roles consistently as you approach ventures.
right.
So going a little bit further with that, what would be your advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, maybe people just about to finish business school, or perhaps even people in a career looking to make a hard pivot and follow their dreams?
Yeah. My biggest advice is, and this is more so like Jeff Bezos's advice, but like put yourself, at 80 years old, right?
Mhm.
And look back and see if you would regret not creating a company, right? For me, that feeling was almost tangible, right? I had anxiety that my time was running out and I needed to make that jump right away. Otherwise, I won't have the time runway to try out different ventures and have a successful one,
Mhm.
right? I'm 29 years old, right? So the next steps in my life are marriage, kids, right? And if you really put a time frame around it, like if I want to have kids at 32, right? I'm 29 now, that's 3 years, right? So I have much more responsibility at 32. So having that awareness and having that understanding of whether you will regret not founding a company is, I think, the biggest indicator of whether you should become an entrepreneur or not. And then the other piece of advice I would say is, um, don't be afraid to fail multiple things, and always run ads, because ads help you fail faster, puts your product in front of eyeballs much faster, right? So that you know whether it's going to work or not.
Great advice. So, given your role as an investor and your experience with tech forward platforms, what are your predictions for the future of tech entrepreneurship?
I'm going to hop on the Gen AI bandwagon here. I haven't actually
Safe.
played, with Gen AI all that much. But what I have noticed is it's really brought down the barrier to entry for folks who want to develop software, right? You've seen some pretty astonishing things with ChatGPT and how it's able to code up different parts or pieces of a software that you could really assemble together like building blocks, right?
Mhm.
So I think the hurdle to becoming a tech entrepreneur has materially gotten lower. And with that, you're going to see a lot more startups, right? A lot more startups enter the field. Now, the hard part, now I'm putting my investor hat on, the hard part is how do you sift through all these startups, right? Which ones are actually valuable? There's a million AI startups, right? And which ones are going to get outcompeted by larger players pretty quickly? And at the end of the day, it's when it comes to AI startups, it's whoever has a proprietary data source and a trained model. So having proprietary data is going to be something that investors look for when it comes to assessing whether a startup is valuable or not.
So, a note to the startup entrepreneurs out there, get your proprietary data source. So, it may be obvious, but I'm just curious how you would answer this question. What is the importance of community and networking as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, community and networking is really important because you never know who can connect you to the right person. Actually, I was um, just last week, something really useful happened, right? So my one of my best friends in New York, Carlos, he hosts these networking events, right? It's pretty new, but he brings together folks that he knows every week. It's about 10 to 15 of us, and they're usually high achieving or they're like founders and entrepreneurs, right? And we get to mingle, get to know each other, etc. Well, one of the folks I met last week actually introduced me to the founder of Chargeback, which is a consumer facing chargeback and subscription management product, right? And he basically said, "Hey, yeah, this guy works in my office. I can introduce you." And we got introduced, and we had some really great conversations so far around how we could partner and collaborate and really innovate in the chargeback space. So yeah, I think that's really critical. Always be, meeting new people and be nice to each other, right? Because then
Right.
you get paid
Agreed.
back.
It kind of uncovers those unknown unknowns.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You never know.
What is on the horizon for Chargeblast?
Yeah. I mean, Charge Blast, we're scaling pretty quick, right? The horizon would be probably just getting our internal workings in order, right? Like you can imagine, but by scaling so quick, it's quite a mess internally. People are running around. Oh, this account's having issues. Oh, this guy can't find his alerts. We actually have about 19 people, right, at the company right now, right? And Charge Blast has only been around for 8 months. So you can imagine it can get a little bit chaotic. And, my personality is, oh, I hate chaos. I hate mess. So we're getting our internal like standard operating procedures in order so that we build like the fundamental building blocks
Mm,
and the structure is strong. So when we scale even faster, it's we're not going to fall apart and provide bad service to our clients.
right. Yeah, there's so many steps involved with a startup. It's interesting. It's almost more of a challenge succeeding because like failing is actually easier in some respects.
Yeah, yeah,
You're kind of building
definitely.
a rocket ship as you jump off a cliff.
Yes.
So, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to highlight before we wrap up our conversation?
I'd say we touched on some pretty good points. I think at the end of the day, based off of your viewers and other folks listening to your podcast, like when it comes to entrepreneurship, right? I think it's becoming more prevalent, and I'm quite excited about that. And I really emphasize the importance of founders meeting each other because you get to learn from their failures, and they get to learn from your failures, right? And you fail even faster that way, right? You're already failing, and now you get to experience someone else's failure,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. That's a great learning process. So highly recommend that.
I saw this quote. I might have been on social media that the great people, the heroes you look up to, aren't ones that never failed. They're just the ones that didn't let failure stop them. I really like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Just have to keep at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, where can people follow Charge Blast and you? Where would you like to point
sure.
us?
Yeah, I mean, follow us on Twitter, right? My Twitter handle is Chi like cheetah because no one can ever pronounce my name
Okay.
correctly on the first try. So
Okay.
put in the handle.
Okay.
And then if you want to get more updates on Charge Blast in general, I would say our LinkedIn is probably where we're most active.
Okay. We'll put those in the show notes. Well, Chi, thank you very much for sharing your insights, giving some advice to the entrepreneurs in the audience, and just opening our minds a little bit. It's been really nice talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, David. Appreciate it.